Hello, welcome to the Lonely Show. I'm your host, John Malone, and in this episode, I've not brought on regulars yet. I mean, they might come, but who knows? But as for our guest, he's from West Bloomfield, Michigan. He's an attorney, author, and podcaster. He has written thriller novels, society justice and safety children's books, and so much on, as well as having his own podcast called Justice Counts. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mark Bello.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Great. So, how's life?
We were just discussing that off air. Life is good. I just turned 70 on April 2nd. I
Oh,
uh,
okay.
I've been retired from practicing law now for about 4 years. Ever since I retired, I started writing these novels that you mentioned, and I'm starting over a new career. I'm having a lot of fun. I wouldn't say I'm selling a whole lot of books, which is one of the reasons why I like to appear on podcasts like yours. I like to introduce myself to people, but um, there are a lot of lawyers obviously out there, but very few retire after a long career and decide to become an author in their 60s. So I'm having kind of a fun reinventing myself, if you will.
Okay. Great. So, tell me more about these books you've written.
Well, um, I have a website, markmbello.com. There are eight now legal thrillers. Seven of them have a theme of betrayal in the title. So I've written Betrayal of Faith, Betrayal of Justice, Betrayal in Blue, Betrayal in Black, Betrayal High, Supreme Betrayal. And then the eighth book, I kind of broke the mold and I wrote a book called You Have the Right to Remain Silent, which I've just released. I also wrote a novella, a Holocaust era novella about my protagonist, Zachary Blake's bar mitzvah, and the promise that his maternal grandfather made to him that he would tell him the story of his escape from Auschwitz when he became a man. So it kind of gives you a glimpse into what prompted Zachary Blake, my legal hero, to become a lawyer. The books are about important subjects in the news. Betrayal of Faith is about clergy abuse. I don't mention the Catholic Church in the book. I call it the church, uh, mainly because even though it was a case, it's based on a case, an actual case that I handled against the Catholic Church. I figure that abuse of children by clergymen is a broad enough topic to not pick on any one denomination. The second book is about a bigoted president based on the 2016 election and the bad things that he might do if he becomes elected. And we can talk about that. I've got a lot of people who criticize me for doing a hit job on Donald Trump. And my response is that I wrote the book before Donald Trump became president. So if you see a similarity between my evil character and Donald Trump, that's on Donald Trump, not on me. Betrayal in Blue is about white supremacy and the thin blue line of policing. Betrayal in Black is about a cop shooting an innocent black man during a traffic stop. Betrayal High is about a school shooting. Supreme Betrayal is about a Supreme Court candidate who has a sexual assault in his past, and his victim wants to prevent him from getting a seat on the court. And my seventh novel, Betrayal at the Border, is about the immigration crisis from two different points of view. One, a South American immigrant, and the other, a naturalized citizen from Kobani in the Middle East. And then my latest book, You Have a Right to Remain Silent, is a murder mystery. Conservative talk show host is charged with the murder of her liberal congressman husband. So you can see I write about typically I write about topics in the news. This latest novel, a murder mystery, is a kind of a breakout from what I've written in the past.
Okay, great. And what in general has inspired you to write these novels or books?
Well, the first inspiration was the case. Betrayal of Faith is based on an actual case. The novel tells the story of two young boys who were abused by a priest. Their brave mother, who embarks on a crusade to get justice for her kids. She hires the only lawyer she remembers, Zachary Blake, who handled her husband's wrongful death case. She's a widow. She finds out that Zachary Blake is not who he used to be. Instead of having a high rise, uh, large, well appointed office, he's now in a rather dumpy 1-story, 2-story building in the bad part of town. And while she wonders what happened to him, she decides to give him a chance anyway. And he tries to sell her out by settling the case too early for too little money. She fires him. He begs her to hire him back. And the case is pursued with vigor against the forces of evil. The church, as I call it in the book, has a clandestine organization within its hierarchy whose job it is to handle matters like this quietly by any means possible, eliminating witnesses, eliminating evidence, and making sure that these cases do not see the light of day. So the forces of good battle the forces of evil, and it basically tells the story of how it felt, Peter, to pursue a case as a David attorney against a Goliath defendant like the Catholic Church. And again, I don't mention Catholic in the book, but the case I handled, the actual case, was against the Catholic Church. The coalition, the clandestine organization within the church, is entirely fictional, but it does describe how it felt. It felt like somebody was behind the scenes pulling strings, transferring witnesses, making people disappear. It felt like there was a broad conspiracy to prevent justice from happening. So I always promised myself I'd write a book about the experience. And I thought I was going to be a one and done author. I thought that I'd written the book. Okay, I did what I said I was going to do. That's that. And then in 2016, the presidential election in America suggested to me that somebody who I felt was unrepresentative of what a good American ought to be ran for president and suggested a Muslim ban and was going to deport all immigrants and committed sexual assaults and said nasty things. And just, I said to myself, oh my God, what if somebody like this becomes president of the United States? And I wrote a book about a bigoted presidential candidate who got elected. At the time I wrote it, Trump hadn't been elected yet. So when the book was released, I got a lot of pushback from the right about doing a, quote, hit job, unquote, on Trump. And my response has always been that I wrote the novel before he was elected. So if you see any similarity between him and my evil fictional president, that's Trump's fault, not mine. And once I realized I could write a book about something I didn't experience personally, even though you could argue that we all experienced the 2016 presidential election personally. Once I realized I could write a book that I didn't experience directly, I started writing novels about topics in the news. And here I am, eight books later.
Wow. Oh my, that's quite a coincidence. Who knew someone would write a book about a potentially bad president of the United States, and then a few weeks later, it came to reality, and I was blaming you for writing a book about it, even though you released it before you came into office. That's mad.
Well, it wasn't invented out of thin air. He was a presidential candidate. He was saying and doing things that I found disgusting and abhorrent. And I said to myself, my goodness, what happens to the country if a bigot becomes president of the United States? And the book is about a young Muslim woman who's falsely accused of murdering a white supremacist, the same white supremacist who bombed her mosque. And the president hears about the case and uses it as his poster child for his new campaign to rid America of its so-called Muslim scourge and make America pure again. So I certainly took it, the idea and some of the rhetoric from the actual campaign. But as I said, what my hope was that Trump was behaving this way to get elected and that he'd become kind of presidential after the election. That obviously never happened. He was the president that he was as a candidate, or that he threatened to be as a candidate, and the book turned out to be kind of prophetic. And that's why the accusations that I did a hit job on him. And again, I remind anybody who is a Trump supporter that if they see a similarity between the two men, Trump could have been a different kind of president and chose not to be.
Okay, interesting. That's great. So, I've heard you have your own podcast.
I do.
Tell me more about that.
The podcast is called Justice Counts. It is about what it says, all things justice. I've had people on to discuss abortion rights, for instance, gun rights. I've had attorneys on. I've had members of the public who have suffered an injustice. We've discussed essentially topics in the news similar to my books that relate to justice issues, whether it be voting rights in America. It's a hot topic today. We've discussed the Supreme Court and how Supreme Court candidates are chosen, and the separation of powers, and why is it that appointing judges is a political issue rather than just a legal one. So it runs the gamut. You name a legal issue in America, and we've discussed it. Recently, we discussed with an attorney and a doctoral graduate the Ukraine Russia war, and whether the activities that are going on are criminal and whether they should be punished in a criminal tribunal. So, pick an issue and we discuss it on Justice Counts.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily, by the way, have to be justice from a legal standpoint. For instance, you could be discussing why a poor person has less access to a lower interest rate than a wealthier person. Why the court system punishes people of color harsher sentences than they do wealthier or white people. So it's all over the board. Justice and injustice is the topic of the day in my podcast.
Okay. That's kind of interesting. I might actually take a look at that once we finish here.
We've done 17 episodes, so please check it out.
Oh yes,
I think
certainly
you'll enjoy it.
will. Oh yes, it's gonna be good.
We even did a podcast about foul balls hitting fans in the stands. And I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but you might know, whether you are or whether you aren't, that Major League Baseball has recently put netting around almost every stadium in the major leagues. And that is the result of the kinds of things that we discussed in the last episode relative to hitting balls into the stands.
Okay, interesting.
It
So,
ha- it has been.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So, have you ever done any justice or law work yourself in general?
Have I what? I'm sorry.
Have you, sorry, have you done any work in the justice system, just justice system?
I spent my whole life in the justice system. As I indicated in my intro, I practiced law for 45 years until I retired at age 65, 66. I handled the case I described to you, the betrayal of faith. My first book is based on an actual clergy abuse case that I handled. I was primarily a personal injury lawyer, so I dealt with the civil justice system mostly. But um, in retirement and as a author and as a podcaster, I feel it's important to discuss inequities in the criminal justice system as well. So the answer to your question is yes, I spent 40 years or more in the civil justice system.
Wow, 40 years. That is a very long time. Longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so what did you like about working in the justice system?
Well, again, I wrote the first book about clergy abuse in the case I handled. The second book is, as I indicated, about a bigoted president. But if you look at the politics, for instance, of law, you have a political movement that suggests that Muslims, for instance, are the bad guys and are responsible for white people not being allowed to do what they want or get the job that they want, or you can point the finger at this minority or that minority and say it's their fault. Uh, the book is about white supremacy, the president's support of white supremacy, and his attempt to railroad an innocent Muslim woman for murdering a white supremacist. And Zachary Blake, the hero of all of my books, including the one that precedes Betrayal of Justice, Betrayal of Faith, is hired to represent the Muslim woman and uh, prevent her from being wrongfully convicted of a murder she didn't commit. Betrayal in Blue is a follow up to that book. A second white supremacist decides he wants revenge and um, plots a sarin gas attack on a city in Michigan, an actual city, Dearborn, Michigan, that has a large concentration of Muslim citizens. And the cop who tries to stop the plot ends up being accused of murder. And Zach is called upon to defend him in a small town where the cops believe that this cop is guilty. Hence, the Betrayal in Blue. Blue, if you're familiar with the term the blue wall, where cops don't typically accuse other cops of crimes, this is the opposite of that, and why it's called Betrayal in Blue. Betrayal in Black is about the shooting of an innocent black man during a traffic stop, based on the Black Lives Matter movement and the kinds of things we've been reading about in the news, and how, by the way, the civil justice system, not just the criminal justice system, but the civil justice system, would handle a case like that and make sure that the widow of the victim is compensated. Betrayal Hyde tells a similar story, but in the setting of a school shooting. What did the school do wrong? What did the administration, the school board do wrong? Can you collect damages from the parents of the child? who commits the crime? Can you take on the gun industry? And there's a loophole, as we just found in the news recently, which is right on point, by the way, with Betrayal High. If you recall the recent settlement in the Parkland High shooting case, where, or was it Sandy Hook? I'm not sure, but there was a settlement against Remington Arms for Remington's own responsibility for what happened. I think it was in the Sandy Hook case. And my book essentially gave a prior look at the possibility that something like that could happen, that a gun manufacturer could be held responsible for, in certain circumstances, because there's a law that gives them immunity passed under the George W. Bush administration. But there is a loophole, and that loophole was presented in Betrayal High and used in the recent settlement against the bankrupt Remington Arms. And then Supreme Betrayal is based on the Kavanaugh hearings about a Supreme Court candidate who was accused rather of a sexual assault in his past, and a rather brave woman who hires Zach Blake to make sure that this gentleman is not going to succeed as in getting a seat on the Supreme Court. So all of my books have some legal theme and issue, mainly pulled from the news, that have a legal slant to them. Betrayal at the Border, the seventh book, is about the immigration crisis and how the immigration system works, both for naturalized citizens who travel overseas and for people who overstay their visas from South America and are deported. And Betrayal at the Border tells those stories.
Okay, great. So, with what you're doing right now, where do you see yourself 20 years from now?
I'll be 90 years old, man. Come on. I hope I see myself rather physically fit, with my wits about me, enjoying my senior citizen years. In the immediate future, at age 70, I just wrote 3 new books. The 8th Zachary Blake book, a Jewish recipe cookbook that is written by Zachary Blake as told to me, and it has anecdotes of his fictional family and recipes that his family, from his family tree over 140 or so years, going all the way back to the 19th century. It's a fun little book that has a lot of what we call in the Jewish religion Jewish shtick in it. There's funny stories and great recipes, and I had a lot of fun writing it. And then I also wrote my first children's book. It's about bullying, and that's going to be released probably around Easter time.
Okay, great. So, do you ever travel?
In what context?
Like to go on vacation or
Oh,
go?
okay. COVID has put a damper on that. Again, as a senior, we're in the class of the population that is most susceptible to the COVID issue. So over the last couple of years, I've been kind of confined to either my home in Michigan or my Florida residence that I spent some time in the wintertime. Right now, I'm talking to you from Florida. But yeah, I've traveled not extensively, but I've done a lot of traveling in Europe. I traveled when I was a student. I did a students abroad program and traveled all over Europe with a backpack. And I actually went to school in Paris, France, at the Sorbonne, and took French to satisfy my language requirement in college back in the 70s. We've been to the Middle East and Israel, every Jewish person's dream. We've been on a lot of cruises, my wife and I, to the Greek Isles, to the Eastern Bloc countries of Europe, to the Baltic, to Mexico. I wouldn't say I'm some kind of world traveler or anything like that, but we've done some traveling. Not recently
Okay.
though. Not recently.
All right. Okay. That's nice. Well, that is all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Mark, talking about your knowledge behind the justice system, the books you've written, and a lot of things. Wow, it's been quite an episode, that's for sure.
If you look at, for instance, what's going on right now, if you look at the Supreme Court nomination process, and you realize here we are in the Biden administration, and he gets one presidential appointment, which is hotly contested, and Donald Trump in 4 years got three, and it basically changed the course of legal history in the United States, and we're about to see how much that's changed in the reproductive rights area and in the voting rights area, and all the things that there are stark differences in the political world on, and you realize how important politics is to how the law is administered. And I would encourage your listeners, whether they're American or British, to pay attention to not only what you're hearing, but the impact of positions that are being taken by politicians, the impact they have on your legal rights. If a particular politician is anti minority and he gets elected, you can assume that minorities will be negatively impacted by that. If a politician is anti abortion and he gets elected, you can assume that abortion rights or reproductive rights are going to take a hit. So before you say a pox on both their homes, there's no difference between this party or that party, I would suggest you think about what issues are important to you and whether or not those issues will be impacted by who you're supporting. And I'm not telling anybody how to vote. I'm just saying think about what's important and vote your conscience if you think that a particular person will impact those things that you think are extremely important. And that's kind of what the concept of these books is. I wanted to shine a light on a number of issues that I feel are important. That who's president or who's your congressman or who's your senator have on those various issues.
Okay. And with that being said, until next time, stay tuned for more.